You're already dead, sweetheart. You just haven't stopped moving yet. Those were the last words they said to her before they walked out and left her hanging in the dark. That was 5 days ago. Amelia Whitford was still moving, 27 years old, wrists bound above her head, no food, no water, no sound except the wind tearing through the walls of an abandoned warehouse on the frozen edge of Blacktail Ridge, Montana, and one name she kept breathing into the dark like it was the only air she had left. Phoebe, her little sister, still out there, still alive. She had to believe that. She was not done yet. If this story hits something in your chest, subscribe, follow until the very last second, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far Amelia's story travels. The man who wasn't supposed to find her, she had stopped counting hours somewhere around day 3. Hours implied a future. Hours implied that time was moving toward something rescue-release resolution. After 72 hours suspended in the dark of that warehouse with her arms above her head and her feet barely grazing the floor, Amelia had made a quiet, deliberate decision to stop counting hours and start counting something she could control. Breaths. Just breaths. In, out. Phoebe. In, out. Phoebe. It was the only system that still worked. Her body had long since stopped cooperating with anything more complex. Her wrists had gone numb on day 2, first the burning, then the deep insistent ache, and then nothing, which was somehow worse than either. Her throat was so dry that swallowing had become a conscious, effortful act, like trying to move furniture through a narrow hallway. She could not feel her feet at all. She had stopped thinking about what that meant. What she thought about instead, every time the darkness pressed close and her mind started to slip sideways towards something she couldn't come back from, was the phone call. 4 minutes, 11 seconds. Leah, I found something. I can't tell you yet, but I found something. Phoebe's voice on that voicemail, careful, controlled, with that particular tightness underneath that Amelia had heard exactly twice before in her life, once when Phoebe was 16 and had gotten into a car with someone she shouldn't have, and once when she was 20 and had accidentally witnessed something at the restaurant where she worked that she had never fully described. That voice meant, I am more scared than I am letting on, and I am letting on quite a bit. 8 months ago. And then nothing. Amelia had done everything right. She had filed a missing persons report that went nowhere. She had contacted every source she had built in 12 years of investigative journalism and pulled every thread that presented itself. She had followed the money, the manifest, the names, and every single trail had converged with the terrible logic of a proof solving itself on one region, one network, one family. The Vulovs. She had come to Montana with a recorder, a camera, a rental car, and the absolute conviction that she was close enough to touch it. That within weeks she would have Phoebe's location. That within months she would have the story that broke the network wide open. Instead, she had 2 sources who were not sources, a walk into a warehouse she had believed was a meeting, and a rope. You're already dead, sweetheart. You just haven't stopped moving yet. She breathed in. Phoebe. She breathed out. Still moving, she whispered to the dark. She didn't hear the door open. She heard the dog. It was not a bark, nothing that straightforward. It was a sound from somewhere lower in the animal's register, a sustained, resonant note that sat at the intersection of alert and uncertain, the sound of a creature with superior senses making a careful professional assessment of something it had not expected to find. It moved through the cold air of the warehouse and hit Amelia's nervous system like a current. Real. That sound was real and recent and close. She tried to lift her head. Her neck muscles, which had been angled downward for 5 days, staged an immediate protest. She got 40 degrees, maybe 45, enough to see a thin blade of light cutting under the warehouse door and then widening as the door swung inward. Hello? Her voice came out as something barely above a texture, rough, cracked, almost shapeless. She wasn't sure it had carried more than 3 feet, but the dog heard it. The sound from the animal changed, the uncertainty dropping out of it, something more directed taking its place, and then the boots came through the door. Heavy, unhurried, each footfall deliberate in a way that communicated without ambiguity that the person wearing those boots had never once needed to move quietly, because no one with functional survival instincts would position themselves as a threat to him. The boots stopped. A flashlight beam swung through the dark and found her. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. She counted. Then, what the hell? Not a question, not an exclamation. A statement addressed to the room at large in a low voice roughened by years and accented faintly with something Eastern European, the flat, almost philosophical disbelief of a man who had walked into many unexpected situations in his life and had developed as a coping mechanism the habit of narrating them. "Please," she started, "don't move." He was already crossing the floor toward her, fast now, the flashlight steady. "How long?" "5 days. Each word costs something. The rope's my arms. You have to be careful coming down. If circulation returns too fast." "I know," he said, and the way he said it, clipped certain without explanation, told her he did. He crouched in front of her, and the flashlight hit the floor between them at an angle, and for the first time she saw his face. Heavy bones, a jaw that carried a scar along its lower edge, pale against the dark stubble. Eyes that were very dark and very quick. Moving across her face, her arms the rope above her, with the rapid inventory-style assessment of someone calculating exactly what had been done and approximately how long ago and precisely what needed to happen next. Not a face she would have called kind, but a face she trusted immediately, and she didn't know why, and she didn't have the resources to interrogate it. "I'm going to take your weight first," he said. "Before the rope. Tell me when you're ready." "I'm ready," she said. She had been ready for 5 days. His hands came under her arms from behind, and he absorbed her weight so completely and so suddenly that something in her chest cracked open. Not pain, not exactly, but the accumulated pressure of 5 days of suspension releasing all at once, and she heard herself make a sound she had never made before, ragged and involuntary and entirely out of her control. "Easy," he said. Same voice, flat, factual, not performing comfort, but somehow delivering it anyway. "Don't," she started. "Don't tell me to be easy. Don't talk to me like I'm fragile." But the sentence didn't finish because her throat seized and she had to use the breath on something more important. The blade. She heard it come out of the sheath, one clean practice sound, and then the rope above her parted and her arms came down. What happened next was beyond language. Every nerve ending that had been compressed and starved and slowly strangled for 5 days screamed back into existence simultaneously, and the world went white and roaring at the edges, and she would have gone down completely if his hands hadn't already been there, lowering her with careful efficiency to the floor, his back taking all of it, his grip adjusting without instruction as her legs folded. "Czar," one word addressed to the dog. The animal enormous, she could feel that even without seeing it clearly, a solid wall of warm muscle moved into her lap without hesitation, and the weight of it against her legs was the most real thing she had felt in 5 days. She pressed both hands into its fur, reflexively fingers spreading, and the rod breathed slow and even against her stomach, and for a terrible, unguarded moment, Amelia felt her eyes burn. She blinked it back. "Who are you?" she asked. He was crouching in front of her, the flashlight between them. His elbows on his knees, hands loosely linked, watching her with that same complicated expression, not warm, not cold, something that had been both once and had since become something else entirely. "Konstantin Vulov," he said. The name went through her like a temperature change. She stared at him. He let her stare. "The boss," she said. "Yes. Your family hung me from that rafter." His jaw moved. Something behind his eyes shifted, not guilt, not quite, but the thing that lives next to guilt in a man who has built a life on responsibility and just discovered that something has been done in his name that he did not sanction. Something colder than guilt. More dangerous. "Someone inside my family hung you from that rafter," he said. "Without my knowledge, without my order." He paused. "That distinction is not me avoiding responsibility. That distinction is the entire reason I'm standing in this warehouse tonight." She looked at him for a long moment. "You're investigating a betrayal," she said. His eyes moved to hers. "Yes. Inside your own organization." "Yes. Human trafficking, running through your routes, your infrastructure, your name." The silence that followed had a particular quality, the quality of a man hearing his own wound described by someone who has been studying it longer than he has. "How long have you known?" he asked. His voice was very controlled. 8 months, she said. I'm a journalist. My name is Amelia Whitford. I came to Montana with records, photographs, and a chain of evidence that traces the network directly into your organization. She held his gaze. Your name comes up constantly, but the more I looked, the more I started to believe you didn't know. I didn't, he said, flat, absolute. I know, she said, that's not a compliment. That means someone inside your family has been clever enough to operate under your nose for at least 18 months, possibly longer. Something moved through his expression, quick and dark there and gone. 18 months, he repeated quietly. At minimum. Probably longer. He stood up. She watched him take 3 steps away and stop his back to her, one hand opening and closing at his side. The specific, contained motion of a man managing something that unconstrained would be catastrophic. She gave him 10 seconds. Mr. Vulov, her voice came out steadier than she expected. I have a missing sister. He turned. 23 years old, she said. Brown hair, a laugh like... She stopped. Rebuilt. She found something she shouldn't have found. 8 months ago, she disappeared into this network. I have traced her last known location to a transfer point 40 miles from this warehouse. She looked at him directly. I need what you have, and you need what I have. And whoever did this to both of us is right now operating under the assumption that I am dead and you are still in the dark. He looked at her for a long moment. They're wrong, he said. They're wrong on both counts, she agreed. Something crossed his face, still not a smile, but the structural precondition for one, the particular reorganization of features that in a different man, in a different life, might have become one. He crossed back to her, crouched down, and opened the pack he'd dropped nearby. Water bottle handed over without ceremony. She took it and drank slowly, deliberately, because she was not going to humiliate herself in front of this man by passing out from rehydration. She drank, stopped, breathed, drank again. There's food in there, he said. Energy bars. Eat slowly. I know how to eat, she said. People who've been starved for 5 days frequently forget, he said. She looked at him. He looked back. She took an energy bar. I have a name, he said, while she ate. One name, someone senior enough to have access to the routes and the contacts. Someone I trusted. He said the last word with a particular inflection, not bitterly exactly, but with the precise surgical excision of a man removing an infected thing that had been part of him. I've been building confirmation for 6 weeks. I have the same name, she said, and 3 more. He went very still. 3 more, he repeated. This isn't one person operating alone, she said. It's a structure. 4 people at minimum, possibly more. Your man is the access point, the one who opens the doors. But there are others handling logistics, transportation, collection. She paused. And there's someone above them, someone outside your family who organized the whole architecture. The flashlight between them flickered one brief, irregular pulse and held. You've been carrying this alone, he said. It wasn't a question. For 8 months, she said. Yes. Why didn't you go to law enforcement? She looked at him with an expression she didn't bother to moderate. Because the 4th name on my list is a federal marshal, she said, and I don't know yet how far above him it goes. The warehouse went very quiet. Tsar made a small sound, not alarmed, just attentive, and shifted against her legs. Vulov stood slowly. His face in the upward-angled light from the flashlight was unreadable, in the way that only very controlled people are unreadable, not blank but locked, everything happening behind a surface that had been reinforced by decades of never letting the wrong person see the wrong thing at the wrong moment. Can you stand? He asked. She flexed her legs, assessed the feedback her body was giving her. Almost, she said. 90 seconds. Take them, he said. He moved to the wall, stood with his arms crossed, and watched the door. Not watching her, giving her privacy for the indignity of rebuilding herself from the floor, up which she appreciated more than she would ever say. She used the 90 seconds to think. Konstantin Vulov had come to this warehouse tonight for his own reasons, looking for his own betrayal. He had not come here for her. He had not come here to be her ally, her protector, her resource. He was a mafia boss, a man who had built his power on violence and control, and the kind of moral architecture that made journalists exactly like Amelia his natural adversaries. He had cut her down. He had given her water. He had told her his name and his wound, and something he almost certainly never told strangers. None of that made him safe. None of that made him good. But all of it made him motivated. And in her experience, a motivated man with resources and a personal stake was worth more in practical terms than any ally she could have designed from scratch. "Be careful," said the voice in her head that had kept her alive for 12 years of covering people who did not want to be covered. "Be very careful." I know she told it, I know. She put her hand on the wall. She pushed herself upright. Her legs shook, steadied, held. "I'm up," she said. Vulov turned from the door. His eyes moved across her, the same inventory assessment recalibrated. "The car is a quarter-mile out," he said. "Tsar will stay close. If you need to stop—" "I won't need to stop," she said. Something in his face, a very small adjustment, so small she might have imagined it. "I know," he said. "I'm telling you anyway." She looked at him. She had spent 8 months hunting the shadow of this man through shipping manifests and wire transfers and terrified anonymous sources who shook when they said his name. She had built a picture of him that was all architecture and no interior power, without person threat, without texture. The man standing in front of her was considerably more complicated than that picture. She didn't know yet if that was better or worse. She picked up the pack. She checked that her legs were still cooperating. She looked at the rope hanging from the rafter above her, frayed where the blade had cut it, swaying slightly, and she looked at it for exactly 1 second, which was all it was going to get. Then she looked at the door. "Let's go," she said. Vulov moved to the door and pushed it open, and the Montana night came in savage and cold and enormous, and Amelia Whitford walked out of the warehouse where she was supposed to have died with the most dangerous man in the region at her side, and his dog pressing warm and steady against her leg. And somewhere out there in the dark, her sister was still waiting. She was going to find her, whatever that cost, whatever it took. She walked forward, and the cold took her in, and she did not stop. The cold hit her like a wall the moment she stepped outside, and Amelia's legs nearly buckled under the shock of it, not from weakness alone, but from the contrast, the sudden violence of open air after 5 days of sealed darkness. She caught herself, straightened, kept walking. Vulov did not offer his arm. She was grateful for that. Tsar stayed at her left side, close enough that his shoulder brushed her thigh, with every step steady and deliberate, like an anchor that had decided to become mobile. She had both hands tucked inside the pack straps to keep the circulation moving, and she focused on the ground directly in front of her feet, because right now that was the only horizon that mattered. "Quarter-mile," Vulov said, walking slightly ahead, not waiting for her, setting a pace she could match without being asked if she could match it. "I heard you the first time," she said. "Good." They walked. The first 100 yards were the worst. Her feet were still half numb, and the terrain was uneven, and twice she felt her ankle roll in a way that sent a spike of white pain up her leg that was actually, in its own terrible way, a relief. Pain in her feet meant blood returning, meant her body was still negotiating with the cold instead of surrendering to it. She said nothing about either ankle. She just adjusted and kept moving. At the 200-yard mark, she said, "How did you find the warehouse?" "Tsar," he said without turning. "The dog found it." "The dog found you. I was looking for the warehouse." He paused. "I've been looking for it for 6 weeks. I knew something was using my infrastructure in this region, but I couldn't locate the physical point. The routes were being accessed and cleared before I could trace them." He paused again. Tsar caught a scent about 300 yards north of where we were and stopped taking direction. "Good dog," she said. From beside her left leg, Tsar's tail moved once. "He has better instincts than most people I employ," Vulov said. There was something in his voice when he said it, not quite humor, but the residue of it, like the outline of something that used to be there. Amelia filed it away. 6 weeks, she said. "What changed 6 weeks ago? What made you start looking?" He was quiet for 3 full seconds. In the dark ahead of her, she could see the set of his shoulders, the specific tension of a man deciding how much to give. "A shipment went wrong," he said finally. "One of my standard transport routes. Lumber, paper goods, legitimate cargo. I run a real business, Miss Whitford, alongside everything else. One of my drivers reported a discrepancy in weight and smell on a trailer that came back through a secondary hub I don't use for anything sensitive." He stopped walking. She stopped too. He turned to face her. In the dark, his expression was difficult to read, but his voice carried everything his face was withholding. There were people in that trailer, he said. My driver didn't know. The trailer had been added to his route without documentation cleared by someone with system access, and by the time he reached the secondary hub, it was empty, swept clean. He paused. My driver has been with me for 11 years. He came to me directly. He was... A muscle in his jaw tightened. He was shaking. Amelia was quiet. You didn't go to your people, she said. I went to one person, he said. The only person inside my organization I was certain hadn't been compromised, because he had been out of the country for 4 months and could not have been part of the setup. He started walking again. He's been helping me build the case quietly, from the inside. What's his name? A beat. Dima, he said. Dmitry Sorel. He's 26. He came up through the organization when he was 19. I mentored him personally. The word personally landed with a weight that was almost physical. Amelia kept pace with him. You trust him? Completely, he said. And the completeness of it, no qualifier, no hesitation, told her more about Konstantin Vulolov than anything else he had said so far. This was a man who almost never used that word, and when he did, he meant every letter of it. Has Dima found anything? She asked. He found a name, Vulov said. Victor Brass, mid-level, been with the family 8 years, handles logistics coordination for the northern routes. Dima traced 3 route modifications over 14 months, all of them run through Brass, all of them involving trailers or containers that were added last minute and removed before reconciliation. He paused. Brass is good at this. He's been careful, but not careful enough. Victor Brass, Amelia said. She said it carefully, like she was testing the weight of it against something she was carrying internally. Vulov glanced at her. You recognize the name. He's on my list, she said. As what? As number 2. She met his eyes. He's not the top. He reports to someone. And that someone reports to the person outside your organization who built the whole architecture. She paused. I've been calling him the architect. I don't have his real name yet, but I have his pattern, the way he structures routes, the timing, the way he insulates himself with layers. He's done this before, not here. Somewhere else first, then here. Vulov stopped walking. She stopped with him. Where else? He asked. His voice was very level. Eastern Seaboard, she said. 5 years ago, a network that ran for 3 years before it was partially dismantled. Partially because the man at the top was never identified. The people they caught gave up names below them and stonewalled on everything above. She looked at him directly. 3 of the people convicted in that case were released early. 2 of them moved to Montana within 18 months of release. The silence between them had a specific quality. The quality of 2 people realizing simultaneously that the thing they had each been looking at from different angles is the same thing, and it is considerably larger than either of them had understood. He rebuilt it here, Vulov said quietly. He found a new infrastructure to hide inside, she said. Yours. The word landed between them and stayed there. She watched his jaw tighten, watched his hands close, watched the very deliberate, very controlled process of a man taking an enormous thing. Rage, humiliation, the specific fury of a person who has been used as a tool without his knowledge, and compressing it into something he could carry. How long have you known this? He asked. His voice was very quiet, that particular quiet. I connected the Eastern Seaboard network to the Montana operation about 4 months ago, she said. I've been building the link since then. 4 months, he repeated. And you came here alone. One journalist, no protection, no backup. I had backup, she said. I had 2 sources inside the operation. Men I had been developing for 3 months. I thought they were legitimate. She paused. They weren't. They handed you to Brass. Directly bombed, she said, which means Brass knew I was coming, which means someone identified me as a threat before I even arrived in Montana. She felt the implication of that settle into her chest like cold water. Someone read my communications, or one of the sources I used before I came here wasn't as secure as I thought. Vulov looked at her. You're saying there's a leak higher up. I'm saying I don't know how high up, she said. And until I do, I don't know who I can trust, including... She stopped. Including me, he said. She did not deny it. She held his gaze and said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. He nodded a single slow motion like he was approving of the position even as he occupied the wrong side of it. Smart, he said. Good. Don't trust me yet. He started walking again. But consider this, if I were part of the network, you would not have been cut down from that rope. You would have been left or moved, or you would have woken up somewhere considerably worse. Or cutting me down is the setup, she said. Gain my trust, get everything I have, eliminate the problem cleanly. He was quiet for a moment. That is also possible, he said. You should keep that possibility available. She stared at the back of his head. You just argued against your own case. I told you the truth, he said. What you do with it is your decision. She exhaled. The cold took her breath and turned it visible for half a second before it vanished. Why, she asked. Why tell me to keep the suspicion? Because if you stop being suspicious, you stop being useful, he said. And because, he paused very briefly, because a woman who survived 5 days on nothing but a name deserves to walk into whatever comes next with her eyes open. Not because I told her it was safe. Amelia said nothing for a long moment. Then Phoebe, she said, my sister. I told you she found something. What she found, I think it was a list, a manifest of some kind. Names, dates, transfer points. She was working as a data entry contractor for a logistics company in Denver that I now believe was a shell company linked to the architects network. She paused. She wouldn't have understood what she was looking at immediately, but Phoebe is she's meticulous. She's the kind of person who notices when numbers don't add up. And once she noticed, she would have started documenting, quietly, carefully, the way she does everything. She contacted you before she disappeared, Vulov said. 4 minutes and 11 seconds, Amelia said. She said she'd found something. She didn't say what. She said she'd call me back in 2 days. She paused. She didn't call back. 3 days later, her apartment was empty. Her phone was disconnected, and her employer reported she had resigned voluntarily. She said the last 2 words with a flatness that contained multitudes. Vulov said nothing for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had shifted, some small but perceptible change in register, something that had not been there before. The young man I mentioned, he said, Dima's contact inside the network, the one who went missing. She waited. His name is Alexei, he said, 22. He had been feeding information to Dima from inside the trafficking operation for approximately 3 months. 2 months ago, he went silent. His last message was 3 words. He paused. It said they moved everyone. Amelia's footsteps slowed. She caught herself and maintained pace, but her mind was running very fast and in a very specific direction. They moved everyone, she repeated. Yes. When was this exactly? 8 weeks ago, he said, 61 days. 61 days ago. She ran the timeline against everything she had. Phoebe's disappearance, the transfer point she had traced the gap in the shipping records that had appeared approximately 9 weeks ago, where there had previously been a pattern, a rhythm evidence of regular movement through the region. The network went quiet around the same time, she said. I noticed it in my records about 9 weeks ago. The pattern changed. Routes that had been active went dark. New ones appeared, but shorter, less traceable, more compartmentalized. She stopped walking entirely this time. They knew someone was looking. They consolidated and moved. Vulov stopped too. He turned to face her fully. Dima came to me 61 days ago with Alexei's last message, he said, the same day I made the decision to start the internal investigation. He looked at her, and in the dark, his eyes were very steady. Someone knew we were both getting close, you from outside, me from inside. And someone made a move, she said, simultaneously, to neutralize both. They tried to starve you to death in my warehouse, he said, and they moved the entire operation before I could find its center. Who knew Dima was investigating internally, she asked. The pause that followed was less than a second, but she felt it. 2 people, he said, myself and Dima. Then the leak isn't from your investigation, she said. The leak is from mine. Someone identified me as a threat, traced the direction of my research, understood I was getting close to the same structure you were looking at from the inside, and moved everything before either of us could land on it. Which means, Vulov said carefully, that someone outside the network has been monitoring your investigation. My communications, she said. Her voice came out harder than she intended. Someone with access to my communications over months, not just recently, long enough to understand the full scope of what I had. She thought about her source contacts, her encrypted channels, the secure emails she had used to communicate with sources. I used a federal secure communications platform for two of my most sensitive source contacts, she said slowly. Vulov looked at her. The federal marshal, he said. On my list, she said. He has access to the communications platform. He would have been in a position to monitor traffic patterns, even on encrypted channels, not reading content, but seeing contact frequency, metadata timing. She pressed her hand against the pack strap. He didn't need to read my emails. He just needed to see how often I was contacting people in this region and watch the pattern accelerate. And when the pattern indicated you were closing in, he told the architect, she said, and the architect moved. They stood there in the dark, the cold between them, the weight of it settling into the specific shape of a conspiracy that was larger than either had bargained for, with roots deeper than either had reached, and two missing people somewhere inside it. Tsar made a sound, low, sudden, entirely different from anything before. Vulov's hand went out, one gesture fast and flat palm toward her. Stop. She stopped. He turned his head, slowly listening with the focused attention of someone who had learned over a lifetime to hear the difference between the sounds of an environment and the sounds of a person trying to be quiet inside one. How far to the car? She asked, barely above a whisper. 100 yards, he said. Did anyone follow you here tonight? No, he said. Then I didn't think so. The difference between those two sentences was approximately everything. Tsar had gone completely still, his body oriented at an angle slightly left of the direction they had been walking. His head low, every muscle in his body communicating the same message with absolute clarity. Someone is there. Vulov reached behind him without looking, and his hand found her arm and moved her back 2 steps, positioning himself between her and the direction the dog was watching. Not a protective gesture, not exactly, more like a tactical adjustment, the automatic repositioning of someone who never stops calculating geometry. There's a ridge about 40 meters to the east, he said quietly. If someone positioned there before we came out, they would have a clear line, she said. Yes. Can they hear us right now? Possibly. Then they already know we left Tigdirna, she said. Yes. She thought very fast. If they were sent to confirm I was dead and found me gone, they need to report that. Immediately, he agreed, which means every second we stand here. I know, he said. Can Tsar track direction? A pause. Yes. Then we know where they are, she said. Right now we have that. In 3 minutes we won't. He looked at her sideways. It was too dark to fully read his expression, but she could hear something in the brief silence. Not hesitation exactly, but the rapid recalibration of a man who had come here tonight, expecting to conduct a solo investigation, and had somehow acquired in the space of an hour an injured journalist who was suggesting tactical decisions with the unsettling confidence of someone who had done this before. You track a lot of people through dark fields, he asked. Only the ones who are about to destroy my story, she said. Something in his posture shifted infinitesimally, but she caught it. Tsar, he said quietly. Find. The dog moved. Fast, low, purposeful. No longer the steady companion pressed against her leg, but a completely different animal. The trained animal cutting left through the dark at an angle that made the geometry suddenly visible in Amelia's mind. The ridge, the distance, the position of whoever was up there watching. Vulov was already moving, and she moved with him because standing still was no longer an option. What she felt keeping pace with him across the frozen ground in the dark was not fear, or not primarily fear. It was the sharp, clarifying electricity of forward motion after 5 days of absolute stillness, the specific and almost dangerous relief of a body remembering what it was built to do. She was cold and starved, and her wrists were rope burned down to something that was going to require serious medical attention. And somewhere out there on a ridge 40 meters east, someone who had believed her dead 40 minutes ago was learning that she was not. They were going to have to adjust. So was she. Tsar barked once short, declarative, certain. A sound that meant here. A sound that meant found. And then from the direction of the ridge, she heard something she had not expected. Not a shot, not a shout, not the sound of a man holding his position. She heard footsteps running, fast panicked, heading north, running to report, running to tell someone that Amelia Whitford was alive and that she was not alone. Vulov said one word very quietly, not to her, to himself. In Russian, she thought, or something close to it. She didn't speak Russian, but she had been in enough rooms with enough dangerous men to recognize the tone. It was the tone of someone who had just understood the full dimensions of a problem for the first time and found it even larger than they had feared. He'll report in 20 minutes, Vulov said. Maybe less. Then we have 20 minutes, she said, to do what? She looked at him in the dark. To be somewhere they won't expect us to be, she said, and to make a plan before they have time to make theirs. She paused. You said Dima is inside the organization. Can you reach him without going through any channel Brass might monitor? Direct line, he said. Only Dima and I have the number. Then call him, she said, right now, because what just ran off that ridge is going straight to Victor Brass, and Victor Brass is going to realize in the next 20 minutes that someone cut me down. She held his gaze, and the first thing he's going to do is move every piece of evidence that connects him to me. Vulov was already reaching into his jacket. The second thing he's going to do, she said, is move Phoebe. His hand stopped. He looked at her. If she's still alive, Amelia said, and the word if cost her something, she felt it leave, but she said it anyway because she was a journalist, and journalists did not afford themselves the luxury of certainties. They hadn't earned she's being held at a location linked to Brass. The moment he knows I'm alive and talking, he relocates everyone. Vulov put the phone to his ear. It rang twice. Dima, he said, activate the trace on Brass right now. Everything phone vehicle financial. Yes. A pause. Because we have a problem. And a window. Another pause shorter. I'll explain when I see you. 40 minutes. He ended the call. He looked at her. 40 minutes, he said. There's a secondary location not on any documented map of my operations. Brass doesn't know it exists. Dima will meet us there. And then, she asked. And then he said, we find out how deep this goes. She nodded once. Then she started walking north. He walked beside her. Tsar fell into place at her left. The three of them moved through the dark, the Mafia boss, the journalist, who was supposed to be dead, and the dog who had found her. And behind them, the warehouse stood empty, the rope still hanging from the rafter where she had been suspended for 5 days, swaying slightly in a cold draft that came from nowhere and went everywhere. 40 minutes. 20 until Brass knew she was alive. And Phoebe somewhere in the machinery of all of it, waiting. Amelia walked faster. Dima was already there when they arrived. He was younger than Amelia had expected, lean, dark-haired, with the kind of stillness that in a younger man usually meant training, and in this particular young man clearly meant something closer to controlled dread. He was standing near the door with his phone in his hand and his jaw set, and when Vulov walked in, the look he gave him was not the look of an employee greeting an employer. It was the look of someone who had been holding something terrible alone and had finally been given permission to put it down. His eyes moved to Amelia and stopped. She was in the warehouse, Vulov said before Dima could form the question. The Whitford warehouse, Dima said slowly. The one on the grid I flagged 6 weeks ago. Yes. They used it as a holding site. He was still looking at her. How long? 5 days, Amelia said. Something moved across his face, fast, genuine, unguarded, and he looked away before it could finish forming. He pressed one hand briefly against his mouth and then dropped it, and when he looked back, his face was controlled again, but she had seen what was underneath it. This young man felt things, deeply privately in the way that people who work inside brutal systems sometimes do with tremendous force and very little outlet. Brass knows she's out, Vulov said. We have a runner who spotted them leaving. He had a 40-meter head start and a phone. Then Brass already knows, Dima said. He pulled up something on his phone and turned the screen toward Vulov. I activated the trace the moment you called. In the 11 minutes since Brass has made 4 outgoing calls. 3 to numbers I recognize, 2 logistics contacts, 1 is the Eastern Hub coordinator. The 4th number, he paused. Unregistered, prepaid, call lasted 93 seconds. The architect, Amelia said. Both men looked at her. 93 seconds, she said. Long enough for a situation report and instructions. Short enough that the call was structured, he knew exactly what to say and in what order because he's been briefed before on what to do if this scenario occurred. She paused. This wasn't improvised. There's a protocol, which means the architect planned for someone getting out. Dima let out a short breath. He planned for everything. He always does, she said. That's how he's operated for 5 years. He doesn't just build systems for the normal operation. He builds systems for the failure of the normal operation. Every contingency has a contingency. She sat down on the edge of the nearest solid surface because her legs were informing her with increasing insistence that the adrenaline that had carried her across a quarter-mile of frozen terrain was now presenting its invoice. Which means the moment Brass received that protocol instruction, specific things started happening automatically. Evidence gets moved. People get relocated. She held Dima's gaze. Where does Brass stage transfers before they go out of region? Dima looked at Vulov. Tell her, Vulov said. There are 3 secondary staging points on the northern routes. Dima said. I identified them over the last 6 weeks. Brass rotates between them to avoid pattern detection. Based on the last cycle, he should be on point 2 as of 3 days ago. He pulled up a map on his phone and showed it to her. Here. She looked at it, looked at the distance, looked at the timing. How many people at the staging point, she asked. Unknown, Dima said. I've never been able to get inside. I know the location because Alexei described it in one of his last transmissions before he went silent. He paused on the name, just slightly, just enough. Alexei, she said, tell me about him. Dima looked at her and the control in his face developed a hairline fracture. Why Bhasitam? Because he was your source inside the operation, she said, and because his last message said they moved everyone and I need to know how reliable his information was, how well positioned he was, whether everyone means what I think it means. Alexei was, Dima stopped, started again. He came to me 8 months ago. He was 22. He had been recruited into the operation as a driver. He didn't know what he was transporting on the first run. By the second run he did, and he couldn't. He stopped again. He couldn't live with it. He found me because he knew I was close to coast and he thought if anyone could stop it from inside, it was us. He looked at the floor briefly. He was brave, extremely careful. His information was always accurate. 8 months ago, Amelia said quietly. The same month Phoebe disappeared. The room went very still. Dima looked up. Your sister. My sister was a data entry contractor for a logistics shell company in Denver, she said. She found a manifest names dates transfer points. 8 months ago, she called me to tell me she'd found something and then disappeared 4 days later. She looked at Dima steadily. Alexei said they moved everyone 61 days ago, but the operation was running for much longer than that. Where were they holding people before the move? I don't know, Dima said. Alexei was only inside the last leg, the northern Montana routes. He didn't have visibility into the full network. But the architect does, Amelia said. The architect sees the whole board. He's the only one who knows where every piece has been moved. She looked at Vulov, which is why Brass called him tonight. He's not authorized to make those decisions independently. He needed to know where to send what he's holding. Vulov had been standing very still during this exchange, and she had noticed that about him, the way he went quiet when he was processing, genuinely quiet, no performative action, no visible agitation, just a complete and focused stillness that made the room feel slightly smaller. When he moved, it was decisive. When he was still, she was learning it meant he was building something. Dima, he said, the 4th call, the unregistered number. Can we reverse trace it? I already tried, Dima said. The number pinged off a tower 40 miles southeast of here, and then the signal vanished. It's a burner disposed of immediately after the call. He paused. But the tower location is interesting. How so? Amelia asked. There's nothing 40 miles southeast of here except 2 things, Dima said. Forest and a private airstrip that doesn't appear on commercial aviation maps. It shows up on old survey data and on 3-year-old satellite imagery as a cleared strip with a single structure. He looked at Vulov. I found it 4 weeks ago and flagged it as potentially relevant. I hadn't been able to connect it to anything concrete until now. Amelia felt the electricity move through her. She recognized this, the specific, almost painful sensation of separate threads pulling toward a single point, the moment in an investigation when the structure suddenly becomes visible. She had felt it 3 times in 12 years, and each time it had meant she was close enough to reach out and touch the center. "He's there," she said. Both men looked at her. "The architect," she said. "That's where he is. He doesn't operate remotely from a distance. Men like him don't. They stay close enough to control the operation physically when something goes wrong, which means they have a location that's accessible but invisible." She pressed forward. 40 miles southeast. A private airstrip. "He got a call tonight that his operation has been potentially compromised, and he's standing 60 seconds from a runway." She let that land. He's not going to run yet. He's going to wait to see what brass can contain. But the moment he believes it can't be contained, he disappears, Vulov said, "and he rebuilds somewhere else," she said, "like he did before, like he will keep doing." She looked at him directly. "We have one window, right now tonight. If we move on brass and the staging point, while the architect is still in position, waiting for a status report, we might be able to trap both ends simultaneously. The moment we take brass, the architect stops receiving updates. He'll know something went wrong, but he won't know how much we have." "You're describing a 2-point simultaneous operation," Vulov said. "Yes. With 3 people. And 1 very good dog," she said. Another one of those silences. Dima looked at Vulov. Vulov looked at Amelia. Amelia held his gaze with everything she had left, which, given the condition she was in, was operating at somewhere between 30 and 40%, but still constituted a formidable quantity. "I have 4 men I trust completely," Vulov said. "Completely, same standard I apply to that word every time I use it. I can have them here in 22 minutes. 22 minutes gives brass time to move the staging point," Amelia said. 22 minutes also gives you time to eat something that isn't an energy bar, and let Dima look at your wrists before you lose function in both hands, he said, "which based on the color of your fingers is approaching rapidly." She looked down at her hands. He was not wrong. The circulation she had recovered during the walk was being undermined by the continuing cold and the rope damage, and her fingers, in the better light of this interior, were a color that was not entirely consistent with optimal blood flow. 10 minutes for the hands, she said. 12 minutes to eat. The men leave to intercept brass simultaneously. "Agreed," he said. He nodded at Dima, who moved toward a kit bag in the corner that turned out to contain, among other things, a first aid supply that was significantly more comprehensive than anything you would find in a civilian context. Amelia did not comment on this. She sat very still while Dima cleaned and wrapped her wrists with a focused, practiced efficiency that told its own story about the kind of situations this young man had encountered, and she ate from the pack Vulov had given her, and she thought about Phoebe. She thought about Phoebe at the staging point, or not at the staging point, or somewhere else entirely that she hadn't mapped yet. She thought about Phoebe's voice on the 4-minute, 11-second voicemail. "I found something, Leah," and the specific, terrifying courage it had taken for a 23-year-old data entry contractor to decide that finding something meant she had an obligation to do something about it, even though doing something was genuinely dangerous. Phoebe had always been braver than she looked. That was the thing people misunderstood about her. They saw the laugh, the ease, the warm social fluency, and they cataloged her as soft. But the same quality that made her turn toward frightened strangers rather than away from them was the quality that, when pointed at a genuine injustice, became something entirely else. Phoebe had seen the manifest, and she had known immediately what it was, and she had not looked away. "You're more like her than you think," their mother had said once of Amelia. "The difference is you chose the right career." Amelia had understood that as a compliment at the time. Right now she was reconsidering the category. "Done," Dima said, and tied off the bandage on her second wrist. He sat back and looked at her with those dark, careful eyes. "You should be in a hospital." "I know," she said. "Later." "Later, maybe." "I know," she said again, and the way she said it closed the conversation without being rude about it. He nodded slowly. "Your sister," he said. "What does she look like?" She told him. Brown hair, medium height, a small scar on her chin from a bike fall at age 9. A laugh that arrived before it should and stayed past its welcome. Dima listened with the particular quality of attention she was coming to recognize, as specific to him, total patient, like he was filing every detail somewhere it would not be lost. Alexei described some of the people he saw at the staging point, Dima said when she finished. Most of them he couldn't identify, they were moved too quickly. But he mentioned once, he stopped, selected his words with obvious care. He mentioned a woman who he said had been there longer than the others, who the handlers treated differently, not more gently exactly, but more carefully, like she had some kind of value beyond the standard operation. Amelia's breath stopped. Information value, she said. That was my interpretation, Dima said quietly. Someone who knew something. Someone they needed cooperative, not just compliant. She pressed both wrapped hands flat against her thighs and breathed. Phoebe had the manifest, or at least the memory of it, which meant the network had not taken her because she was a loose end to be eliminated. They had taken her because she was a resource. Someone who could, under the right pressure, describe everything she had seen and lead them to whatever copies she might have made. She would not have told them anything, Amelia said. I know, Dima said, and the gentleness in his voice was so careful and so precisely placed that it hurt more than the alternative would have. She's stubborn, Amelia said, phenomenally stubborn, more stubborn than me in that she stopped, reassembled. She's still alive. Alexei said she was still alive, Dima said. 2 months ago. 2 months was a long time. She knew that. She held the knowledge of it in her chest and did not let it become something she couldn't carry because she could not afford it right now. And there was a woman somewhere in this network who was counting on her to remain functional. Vulov came back into the room. My 4 men are 11 minutes out, he said. He looked at Amelia and then at Dima and read the quality of the silence accurately. We have a possible location for your sister, he said. It was not a question. The staging point, she said. If Alexei's description is accurate, then we move on the staging point first, he said. The architect can wait 20 minutes longer. If Brass is alerted before we reach him, Brass has been under trace for the last 40 minutes, Vulov said. His vehicle hasn't moved. His phone has gone silent in the last 8 minutes. He looked at her steadily. When a man goes silent after 4 rapid calls, there are 2 explanations. Either he's received his instructions and is executing them quietly, or he's been told to hold position, she said. Yes. The architect told him to wait, she said, thinking aloud fast. He needs more information before he decides how to respond. He doesn't know yet how much we have. He told Brass to sit still until he knows whether this is a minor exposure or a full compromise. Which gives us our window, Vulov said. She stood up. Her legs cooperated better than they had 20 minutes ago. The food, the bandages, the brief rest, the fury. Fury was, she had long since discovered, a remarkably effective substitute for several basic physiological requirements. Your 4 men, she said. They know the staging point location. Dima will brief them in transit, he said. They're good. They know how to enter a location quietly and secure it without, he paused with deliberate precision, without harming the people inside. She looked at him. The qualification in that pause was significant, and they both knew it. What's the secondary target, she asked. While your team takes the staging point. You and I and the airstrip, he said. The word landed in the room like a stone. Dima looked up sharply. Coast. The architect is 40 miles southeast, Vulov said. He's standing next to a runway. Every minute we spend on the staging point is a minute he has to decide to leave. He looked at Dima. Your job is the staging point. Get everyone out. Get them safe. Find Alexei if he's there. Find her sister. He paused, then calls me. You can't go to the airstrip with 2 people in a drone, Dima said. His voice had an edge now, not insubordination, but something closer to fear. The particular fear of someone who has already lost one person to the situation and is watching another walk toward the same edge. I've approached larger problems with less, Vulov said. That's not a comfort, Dima said. It wasn't meant to be. Vulov looked at him for a moment with something in his expression that was quieter than usual, more exposed to the kind of look that passes between 2 people who have an agreement, older and larger than the current conversation. If I don't contact you within 90 minutes of you reaching the staging point, you take everything we have to Marcus Chen. Dima went very still. The FBI special counsel. He's the only federal contact I have that doesn't appear anywhere near Amelia's list, Vulov said. He glanced at her. Correct? Correct, she said. She had cross-referenced Chen 3 months ago and found nothing. If Vulov trusted him and she couldn't find a connection, that was the closest thing to clean they were going to get tonight. 90 minutes, Dima repeated. He was looking at Vulov with an expression that was trying very hard to be professional and was not entirely succeeding. Coast. I'll contact you before that, Vulov said. Simply, finally, the tone of a man who has made a decision and is no longer in negotiation with it. Dima pressed his mouth together, nodded once. Amelia looked between them, and for a moment she saw through the tactical conversation into the thing beneath it. Two people who had over years in danger in the specific intimacy of shared risk become something that the word employer and employee did not remotely cover. The way Dima had said Kos, not Vulov, not Konstantin, but that single-syllable name that was something between a title and a private language told her everything she needed to know about what was at stake for him in the next 90 minutes. Tsar goes with your team, Vulov said, and the dog's ear rotated toward him. He can locate people in confined spaces faster than any of your men. Use him. Dima looked at the dog, then at Vulov. You never send Tsar with anyone else. Tonight I do, he said. Another silence, and in it the weight of what that meant. Then Dima crouched down and looked at Tsar directly, and the dog met his gaze with the calm, total attention of an animal that understood far more than was convenient to explain. Okay, Dima said quietly. Okay. Vulov's men arrived in 14 minutes, not 11, 2 vehicles, 4 men who moved with the economy of people who had done serious things in serious conditions and had long since stopped performing any of it. Dima briefed them in under 3 minutes, showed them the map assigned positions. They absorbed the information without visible reaction or unnecessary questions, which told Amelia everything she needed to know about the quality of Konstantin Vulov's judgment in personnel. She watched the vehicles leave. She watched Tsar go with them, the dog moving to Dima's side with the same unquestioning steadiness with which he had pressed against her in the warehouse, transferring his calm attention to whoever needed it most, which was right now clearly Dima. Then she turned. Vulov was already at his vehicle. He opened the passenger door and looked at her across the roof with those dark, quick eyes. You don't have to come, he said. The architect, she said. He's the only person who knows where everyone in this network has been moved, every transfer point, every holding location, everyone. She held his gaze. If he runs tonight, we get the staging point, but we don't get the full picture. Phoebe might not be at the staging point. Some of those people might not be at the staging point. She paused. I have to come. He looked at her for one long, steady moment. Then get in, he said. She got in. The vehicle moved south fast and quiet through the Montana dark, and Amelia pressed her bandaged hands together in her lap and stared at the road unrolling ahead of them and thought about an airstrip 40 miles away where a man who built networks out of human suffering was standing next to a runway waiting to find out whether tonight was the night he had to run. She thought not tonight. She thought tonight is the night you find out that the woman you left to die in your warehouse had the same conversation you've been having for 5 years. And she took notes. Tell me about the architect, Vulov said, not taking his eyes off the road. Real name unknown, she said. I've been calling him the architect because of how he constructs the networks layer by layer, redundancy built into every level, no single point of failure except himself. He's done this in at least 2 regions that I've documented. He finds an existing criminal infrastructure, something already running with established routes and personnel, and he parasitizes it. Runs the trafficking operation inside someone else's organization, so the legal exposure lands on the host, not him. She paused. He's been doing this for at least a decade, possibly longer. The Eastern Seaboard Network, the partial dismantling 5 years ago, I think that was actually the second iteration, not the first. Then he's done this 3 times, Vulov said. At minimum, she said, he's extremely disciplined, extremely patient, and she stopped. There's one more thing. Tell me. Every network he's built has had an exit signature, she said. When he abandons a host organization, he doesn't just leave. He destroys the evidence in a specific way, fires primarily. Accidents that eliminate both the physical evidence and several of the people who could testify. She looked at him. He's cleaned up after himself twice. Both times people died. Vulov's hands were steady on the wheel. He'll try to clean up here. The moment he decides to run, she said. Yes. The staging point, he said. Dima needs to move fast, she said. He reached for his phone. I'll tell him. Already ahead of you, she said, and she had her own phone out, Dima's number, which she had committed to memory during the briefing, because she committed every number she needed to memory always as a professional discipline, and she was already typing a message, short, direct, 4 words. He burns it, move now. 30 seconds later, Dima replied. Already moving, she put the phone down. The road ahead was dark and long, and the distance to the airstrip was closing at a speed that was either almost enough or nowhere near enough, and she could not tell yet which it would be. But she was moving. After 5 days suspended in the dark, after 5 days of breathing and waiting and refusing to let go, she was moving forward through the Montana night toward the man who had taken everything from the people in that network and who had, as a side effect, taken Phoebe. Amelia Whitford had a recorder in her jacket pocket that she had retrieved from the pack Vulov had given her, her original recorder, which had been in her jacket when they strung her up and which they had apparently not thought to remove. 5 days suspended in the cold of a Montana warehouse. Still there, still charged marginally, still recording the moment she pressed the button. She pressed it now. Quietly in the dark of the moving vehicle, with the most dangerous man in western Montana at the wheel, in an airstrip 40 miles ahead. She pressed it and she started talking low and fast and complete everything she knew, every name, every connection, every piece of the architecture she had spent 8 months assembling directly into the recorder. Because she had been a journalist for 12 years, and she knew that the most dangerous moment in any investigation was the moment before the story broke. And the most important thing you could do in that moment was make sure the story existed somewhere outside your own head. Wherever tonight ended, the story would survive. That was the promise she had made to herself 5 days ago in the dark. She was keeping it. The airstrip was dark when they arrived, and dark was either very good or very bad, and Vulov said nothing as he cut the engine a quarter mile out and let the vehicle roll to a stop on the frozen gravel shoulder. Amelia clicked off her recorder. Light in the structure, he said quietly, not pointing, just stating it, the way he stated most things as a fact delivered to the room for whoever needed it. She saw it, a thin line of light along the bottom edge of the single building Dima had described the structure that appeared on 3-year-old satellite imagery and nowhere else. Just that one thin line, enough to tell you someone was inside and had not yet decided to leave. He's still there, she said. Still there, Vulov confirmed. He's waiting for Brass to report in, she said. He doesn't know yet that Brass is compromised. How long since Dima moved on the staging point? She checked. 18 minutes. Then Brass has been out of contact for at least 25, he said. The architect will start to feel that soon if he hasn't already. She was doing the math. If Brass was supposed to report at regular intervals, the last check-in window would have been... Her phone vibrated. She looked at it. Dima. 2 words. We're in, she exhaled. It came out shaky and she let it because there was no one to perform steadiness for right now except Vulov, and she had stopped performing anything for this man approximately 2 hours ago. Dima's inside the staging point, she said. Vulov nodded once. Then we move now, before the architect realizes his entire network just went silent. There's one thing, she said. He looked at her. I go in with you, she said. Not because I can fight, I can't not, tonight, not like this, but because I'm the only person who has studied this man's pattern for 8 months, which means I'm the only person who can identify when he's lying, when he's stalling, and what he'll say to try to walk out of this. She held his gaze. He will try to negotiate. He's done it before. In the Eastern Seaboard case, he walked out of a federal preliminary interview by offering 3 names above him that turned out to be fabricated. Bought himself 6 weeks and disappeared. She paused. He's extraordinarily convincing. I need to be in that room. Vulov looked at her for a moment with those dark, assessing eyes. Then he opened the car door and said, Stay behind me until I say otherwise. She got out. The cold hit her immediately, but differently now. Not the passive cold of captivity, the cold that just accumulates and waits, but the active cold of forward motion, the cold you move through, And the difference between those two things was profound and physical, and she felt it in her chest as something close to gratitude. They moved in silence. Vulov set the pace fast enough to cover ground, controlled enough not to announce themselves, and she matched it step for step, her bandaged hands loose at her sides, her eyes on the structure ahead, and that thin line of light along its base. 20 yards out, Vulov stopped. He tilted his head slightly, listening. She listened too, and what she heard was a voice low one-sided, the cadence of someone on a phone call, the words not yet distinguishable, but the tone entirely clear, clipped, controlled, and threaded through with the very early stages of something that had not yet become alarm, but was moving in that direction. The architect was making calls, trying to reach people who were not picking up. Now, Vulov said. The door was not locked. It opened under his hand with a single clean motion, and the light that spilled out was harsh and immediate, and standing in the center of it was a man who was nothing like what Amelia had spent 8 months imagining. She had built a picture of the architect from his methods, precise, cold architectural, and she had unconsciously translated those qualities into a physical expectation. Someone contained, someone with the appearance of order. The man standing in front of them was in his early 60s, medium height, with a completely ordinary face that she realized in the first half second of seeing it was the most dangerous thing about him. He was the kind of face you forgot, the kind of face that had been in the room and then hadn't been, and you couldn't have said when it left. Gray at the temples, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, a phone in one hand. He looked at them, and his expression did something remarkable. It didn't change. Not a flinch, not a flash of fear, not the brief involuntary reaction that most human faces produce when a door opens unexpectedly. Just a smooth, immediate recalibration, like a program running an update in real time. Constantine, he said, conversational, almost warm, as if this were a meeting he'd been expecting. Amelia felt every hair on her arms rise. She knew that voice. She knew that voice, and for one vertiginous second, she could not locate why, and then it landed a conference call 14 months ago, a source of hers who had patched her into a logistics planning discussion as a test of the network's communication protocols. A voice she had heard for 40 seconds in the background of a recording she had since listened to hundreds of times. A voice she had never been able to identify. She had been that close 14 months ago and had not known it. Vulov said nothing. He crossed the room in 4 steps and took the phone from the man's hand with the calm efficiency of someone removing a toy from a child, and the man let him take it, which was itself a kind of answer. He had already said what he needed to say or had not been able to reach whoever he needed to reach. "Where are my people?" Vulov said. The man, she still didn't have his name, and she wanted it. She wanted it the way she wanted her next breath looked at him with that smooth, unreadable expression. "Your people," he said. "That's an interesting framing." "Victor Brass," Vulov said, "the 3 logistics coordinators, the Eastern hub contact. My people. Where are they?" "I think," the man said carefully, "that you may be operating under some misapprehensions about the nature of—" "He was in the warehouse," Amelia said. The man's eyes moved to her for the first time since they'd entered, and something happened in them, very small, very fast, there and gone. That was the first genuine reaction she had seen from him. Not fear, not guilt, something closer to calculation, the rapid reassessment of someone who has just discovered that a variable he had eliminated is still in the equation. "Miss Whitford," he said, and the fact that he knew her name said it without hesitation, without pretending he didn't recognize her, told her more than a full confession would have. "You know who I am," she said. "I've been following your work for quite some time," he said. And the way he said it almost admiringly, the tone of one professional acknowledging another, made her stomach turn over. "Then you know what I have," she said. "I know what you think you have," he said. "And I know that in a legal context, what you think you have and what is actually admissible, I'm not a lawyer," she said. "I'm a journalist. I don't need it to be admissible. I need it to be true and I need it to be published, and both of those things are already done." She watched his face. "The moment I walked out of that warehouse, I sent everything I have to 3 separate editors at 3 separate publications with instructions to hold for my call. That was the first thing I did." She paused. "I haven't called them yet." He looked at her steadily. "Meaning?" Meaning the story runs when I tell it to run, she said. Or when I stop being able to tell it anything, which is a contingency I planned for before I came to Montana. She let that sit for exactly the right amount of time. Killing me doesn't help you anymore. It might have 5 days ago before I talked to anyone. It doesn't now. Another one of those smooth recalibrations. He looked at Vulov. Your new associate is persuasive, he said. She's right, Vulov said. Flat, simple. The staging point has been secured, Amelia said. Victor Brass is no longer in a position to execute your protocol. The 3 coordinators are currently being detained. The federal marshal on your payroll has been named in a recording that is sitting in 3 editorial inboxes as of approximately 40 minutes ago. She watched the smoothness in his face develop its first real crack hairline, barely visible, but there. The network is done. The only question remaining is what happens to you personally. He was quiet for a moment. You want a name, he said. I want every name, she said. The full architecture. Not 3 fabricated contacts like you gave the federal preliminary interview 5 years ago. The real structure. All of it. She paused. And I want to know where Phoebe Whitford is. Something moved through his expression. I don't know the disposition of every... Don't, she said. The word came out with a force that surprised even her. Do not. I have been suspended from a rafter for 5 days on nothing but her name. Do not tell me you don't know where she is. You built this network from the foundation. You know every brick. Her voice was steady, and the steadiness of it cost her something enormous. Where is my sister? The man looked at her for a long moment. In that moment, she read him with everything she had, 12 years of reading, people across tables, through phones, across the loaded silence of difficult interviews. And what she saw was not cruelty, not remorse either. Something more transactional than either the expression of a man doing a cost-benefit analysis in real time, weighing what he could still protect against what was already lost. He looked at Vulov. I want an agreement before I say anything further. You're not in a position to negotiate agreements, Vulov said. I'm in a position to be silent, the man said, which is the only position I need. He looked back at Amelia. Your story runs with what you have, regardless of what I say. That's already done, you said so yourself. What you don't have, what the story doesn't have, is the full architecture. The names above me. He paused. Yes, there are names above me. The room went very still. Amelia felt Vulov go quiet beside her. In that particular way, the absolute stillness that meant he was building something, processing at full capacity. Above you, she said carefully. I am not the top, the man said. I am like your Constantine here, a host. A sophisticated one, but a host. He said it with a kind of bleak professional pride. The people above me make what I do look like a county fair operation. They have been running networks like this across 4 continents for 15 years. I was recruited because I am good at what I do. I am telling you this not because I have suddenly developed a conscience, but because... He stopped, looked at them both. Because they will burn me the moment they believe I am compromised, the same way I burn my hosts. He said it with absolute clarity. I built a dead man's switch. A full documentation package, names, accounts, communication records, everything from my level up. It goes to 6 international journalists and 2 foreign intelligence services the moment I fail to enter a code every 72 hours. Amelia's recorder was running in her jacket pocket. She had turned it back on when they entered the building, and it was running, and she was not going to mention that right now. Phoebe, she said. First, he looked at her. Everything else after, she said. But first, right now, you tell me where my sister is. That is not a negotiation item. That is the condition under which this conversation continues. Another silence. Longer this time. She held it, held his gaze, held herself together with the same mechanism she had used for 5 days in the dark. Just the name, just the breath, just the absolute refusal to let go. There is a secondary holding location, he said. Not the staging point Brass used. A separate facility I maintain independently of the network's standard infrastructure. It's where I keep individuals of particular value. He paused. People whose knowledge makes them worth more intact than eliminated. She's there, Amelia said. The woman matching your sister's description was transferred there approximately 6 weeks ago from when the network consolidated, he said. She is, he stopped, selected his word, live. Amelia's hand closed around the recorder in her pocket. and she held it like it was the only solid thing in the room. Address, Vulov said. One word. The tone of someone who was one sentence away from making this situation considerably less negotiable. The man gave it. Vulov turned to Amelia and she was already moving, already dialing Dima, because Dima's team was 40 miles closer to that location than they were. And every minute was a minute, and she had been counting minutes for 8 months. Dima picked up on the first ring. I need you to move, she said. New location. She gave him the address. She may be there. And Dima, she hesitated. Alexei, is he? A pause on the line that lasted approximately one lifetime. He's here, Dima said. His voice was different, compressed, careful, the voice of someone managing something enormous in a very small container. He's, another pause. He's okay. He's asking for Coast. Amelia closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. She opened them. Tell him Coast is coming, she said. Tell him it's almost over. She ended the call and turned back to the room. The architect was watching her with that same unreadable expression, but something in it had shifted, something she couldn't name immediately, and then she could. He was watching her the way someone watches a mechanism they built perform in a way they didn't design it to, with something that was almost but not quite respect. 14 months ago, she said, a logistics conference call, you were in the background. 40 seconds. She looked at him directly. I've been looking for that voice for 14 months. He blinked. Once. You never found it. I just found it, she said. Took me a little longer than planned. Vulov made a sound, not a laugh, something adjacent to it, low and involuntary there for less than a second before it was gone. The architect looked at Vulov. Your associate is... I know, Vulov said. Give me your name, Amelia said. He looked at her. Your real name, she said. Not the operational identity. Your actual name, the one that goes on the documentation package in your dead man's switch, the one the names above you use when they talk about you. She held his gaze. I've been calling you the architect for 8 months. I want to know who you actually are. A long moment, longer than anything prior, something genuinely complicated passing through that carefully controlled face, not the transaction calculation of before, but something that went deeper. The particular expression of a person being asked to be themselves after a very long time of being exclusively something else. Raymond Holt, he said. She pulled out her recorder and held it up so he could see it. His expression completed itself, that almost respect landing fully. You had that running. Since we walked in, she said, everything I've said. Everything, she confirmed. He looked at the recorder for a moment. Then he looked at her and something in his face settled, not resignation, not exactly, but the specific stillness of a man who has reached the end of a calculation and is accepting the result with whatever composure he has left. Raymond Holt, she said into the recorder, stating for record location of a secondary holding a facility existence of a documentation package identifying network structure above operational level admission of awareness of Phoebe Whitford's location and condition. She looked at him. Is there anything you want to add or correct? He was quiet for a moment. Tell your editors, he said, that the network above mine has 3 active operations currently running. Not here. Internationally. He paused. That's the story that matters. I am a symptom. They are the disease. He held her gaze. If you want the disease, you'll need what's in my package. Then we'll need to discuss your cooperation agreement, she said. Yes, he said. We will. She looked at Vulov. Vulov looked at her. In the look that passed between them was an entire conversation, the compressed wordless shorthand of 2 people who had been in crisis together long enough to have developed a working language without intending to. Can we trust this? Can we afford not to? No, correct. Her phone vibrated. Dima, she answered it. We're at the secondary location, Dima said. His voice was different again. Different from the compressed, careful tone of before. Different from anything she had heard from him. Looser, something moving through it that was either tremendous relief or something adjacent to it that she couldn't classify from 600 miles away. Amelia. She went very still. Amelia, he said again, and the way he said her name told her everything, told her all of it before he said the next word. She's here, Dima said. He stopped, cleared his throat. She's asking for you. The recorder clicked off. It didn't matter. Everything that needed to be captured had been captured. Everything that needed to happen next didn't need a recorder. She pressed the phone to her ear with both bandaged hands, and she said in a voice that came from somewhere considerably deeper than journalism or strategy or the controlled fury she had been running on for 8 months, "Phoebe." And from very far away through the line, through the static and the distance and 8 months of silence, a voice she had played back 4 minutes and 11 seconds at a time came through the phone and said her name. Leah. Just that. Just 2 letters. A voice like a laugh that stayed past its welcome rough, now worn at the edges, but there. Completely undeniably still there. Amelia Whitford, who had survived 5 days on nothing but that name, pressed the phone against her ear and let the thing she had been holding for 8 months go felt the release of it, enormous and physical, like a fist unclenching after so long it had forgotten what open felt like. She did not look at Vulov, but she felt him take one step back deliberately, giving her the private geography of the moment. She breathed. "I'm coming," she said into the phone. "I'm coming right now. Don't go anywhere." From the other end, a sound that was half a laugh and half something that had never quite made it to a laugh, compressed and tired and absolutely stubbornly alive. "Where would I go?" Phoebe said. The drive to the secondary location took 41 minutes. Amelia counted every one of them. She sat in the passenger seat with the phone in her lap and Phoebe's voice still living somewhere in her chest, and she did not speak, and Vulov did not ask her to. Raymond Holt was in the back seat with his hands zip-tied Vulov's from the pack, applied with the same efficient lack of ceremony as everything else the man did, and he was silent too, which was either cooperation or calculation, and she was past the point of caring which. Dima called at the 20-minute mark. "Status," Vulov said, answering on speaker. 12 people secured from the secondary location, Dima said, "including your sister." He was talking to Amelia and the care in his voice was deliberate. She's walking. She's coherent. She's angry. A pause. "She's extremely angry, actually. She asked me 4 separate times who authorized her detention and what their legal exposure was." Something broke open in Amelia's chest and came out as a sound that was almost but not quite a laugh. "That's her," she said. "That's completely her." "Alexei is with her," Dima said. "They apparently knew each other. From the facility, he kept her ear." He stopped. He looked out for her, as much as he could. Amelia looked out the windshield at the dark road ahead and breathed through something enormous. "Tell her I'm 20 minutes out," she said. "I already told her," Dima said. She said, and I'm quoting directly, "Tell Leah she better not have done anything stupid getting here." This time the sound that came out of her was unambiguously a laugh, and it hurt her ribs and her throat and her wrist all simultaneously, and she did not mind at all. She ended the call. From the back seat, Raymond Holt said quietly, "Your sister sounds like someone worth finding." She did not turn around. "Don't," she said. He was quiet. Vulov's eyes moved to the rearview mirror for 1 second and then back to the road. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The last 20 minutes passed in a silence that was different from all the silences before it, not tactical, not loaded, not the silence of 2 people calculating what to say next. Just the silence of forward motion and the specific physical impatience of being close enough to touch something you have been reaching for so long that your arm has stopped feeling like your own. When the vehicle stopped, Amelia was out of the door before the engine fully cut. She heard Dima say her name from somewhere to the left, but she was already moving toward the figure standing 30 feet away, smaller than she remembered, or maybe just reduced by what the last 8 months had taken with her arms wrapped around herself, and her hair shorter than the last photograph Amelia had of her wearing someone else's jacket that was 3 sizes too large. Phoebe turned. They crossed the distance between them at the same moment the way people do when the distance is finally small enough that the body overrides every other consideration. And when Amelia's arms went around her sister, she felt the difference immediately. The angles that should not be angles, the weight that was not there. And she tightened her hold anyway, carefully, fiercely, with the specific care of someone holding something both precious and damaged. "I've got you, she said. Phoebe's hands were fisted in the back of her jacket. "I know," she said. Her voice was rough and quiet and absolutely certain. "I know you do." They stayed like that for a moment that was not long enough, and could never have been long enough, and Amelia let herself have it, let herself exist entirely inside it without pulling toward the next thing, the story, the recording, the network, the names above Holt that still needed to come down. Just this, just her sister's heartbeat against her collarbone. Then Phoebe pulled back far enough to look at her, and her eyes sharp brown. Their mother's eyes moved across Amelia's face with the rapid cataloging attention of someone who has been waiting a long time to do exactly this assessment. Your wrists, she said. I know. You were held somewhere. I know. How long? 5 days. Phoebe's jaw tightened in a way that was so specifically recognizably their mother's jaw that Amelia felt something in her throat tighten in response. Who? Phoebe said. Not a question, a direction of travel. We have him, Amelia said. In the car. Phoebe looked at the vehicle, at the shadow in the back seat, then back at Amelia, and the expression on her face was one Amelia had seen exactly once before when Phoebe was 17, and a boy at school had said something to their younger cousin that required addressing, and Phoebe had addressed it with a completeness that had impressed and slightly alarmed everyone present. I want 5 minutes with him, Phoebe said. You cannot have 5 minutes with him, Amelia said. 4 minutes. Phoebe, he kept me in a room for 8 months, Leah. I know. She held her sister's gaze. I know. And he is going to spend considerably longer than 8 months in a room that he did not choose because of everything I have on that recorder and everything he is going to give us in exchange for the cooperation agreement. She paused. But I need him intact and cooperative for that, which means you cannot have 4 minutes with him. A long, charged silence. Fine, Phoebe said with the specific intonation of someone accepting a condition they find entirely inadequate. Thank you, Amelia said. Don't thank me. I'm not happy about it. I know you're not. Dima appeared at Amelia's shoulder. He looked at Phoebe with an expression that was professional and careful and had something underneath it that was neither. There's transport coming, he said. Medical team, 40 minutes. I don't need a medical team, Phoebe said. You've been in captivity for 8 months, Dima said. I'm aware, she said. Then you need a medical team, he said, and the firmness in it, gentle but absolute, the tone of someone who was not going to move on. This clearly surprised her because she looked at him with a slightly recalibrated expression. You're Dima, she said. He blinked. Yes. Alexei talked about you, she said. A lot. She looked at him steadily. He said you were the only person inside that organization who was trying to do the right thing. Something happened in Wayba's face that he did not fully manage to contain. Where is he? He asked. His voice was very controlled. Inside, she said. He won't come out yet. She paused, and the pause held a weight that described without requiring description exactly what 8 months inside that network had done to a 22-year-old. He will. He just needs a minute. Dima nodded once. Then he walked toward the building, and his walk was the walk of someone who had been managing a very specific fear for 61 days and was about to find out whether it had been warranted, and Amelia looked away to give him the privacy of it. She turned. Vulov was standing near the vehicle, one hand on the roof, watching her. He had the particular quality of stillness he carried when he was leaving space for someone else's moment. Deliberate, respectful, the kind of stillness that in a smaller man might have looked like discomfort, but in him looked like a decision. She walked to him. 12 people, she said, from the secondary location alone. How many from the staging point? Dima said 9, he said. Total 21. He paused. That we know of. There are more, she said. The network above Holt has 3 active operations internationally. Different hosts, different regions. 21 is the local count. She looked at him. The documentation package in Holt's Dead Man's Switch, if it's real, if it actually contains what he says, it could be the most significant trafficking network exposure in 15 years. Vulov said nothing for a moment. Then, is it real? I think so, she said. Men like Holt build Dead Man switches for the same reason they build everything else, because they need it to work. It has to be real to function as leverage, and leverage is the only currency he has left. Then we need to control how it releases, he said. Yes, she said, and that means the cooperation agreement needs to happen fast before he decides the leverage is worth more than the deal. She looked at him. You said Marcus Chen, FBI Special Counsel. He's clean, Vulov said. I verified it 3 ways before I ever used his name tonight. I need to call him, she said, now, before anything else moves. If Holt's package releases on its 72-hour clock without a controlled agreement in place, it goes to 6 international journalists simultaneously and the story fragments. Everyone takes a piece, no one gets the whole architecture, and the network above Holt disperses before anyone can coordinate a response. Vulov reached into his jacket, produced a phone different from the one he'd been using as secondary, she noted, and held it out. Chen's direct line, he said. He picks up. She took the phone. She looked at it for exactly 1 second. He's going to ask who's calling, she said. Tell him Coast, Vulov said. He'll know. She dialed. It rang twice. A voice alert, despite the hour, the voice of someone who slept, prepared to be called. Who is this? My name is Amelia Whitford, she said. I'm a journalist. I'm calling from a phone belonging to Konstantin Vulov. I have a recorder containing a full confession from a man named Raymond Holt, who has been operating a human trafficking network inside Vulov's organization for 18 months, and who has identified himself as a mid-level operator in a larger international structure. She paused. I have 21 people who need immediate protective custody and medical attention. I have a federal marshal named in the recording as a network associate, and I have Holt's cooperation conditionally for approximately the next 48 hours before a dead man's switch releases his documentation package internationally. She paused. I need you to tell me you're clean, and then I need you to move very fast. A silence on the line. Not the silence of shock, the silence of a man processing, rapidly running his own internal assessment, cross-referencing what he was hearing against what he already knew or suspected. I'm clean, Chen said. How do you know, Vulov? He cut me down from a rafter, she said. Another silence. Then with the specific compressed energy of someone shifting from 0 to full operational, give me your location. She gave it. I need 3 hours, he said. You have 2, she said. After 2 hours, Holt starts to reconsider. 2 hours, he said. Don't let him make any calls. Already handled, she said. She ended the call and handed the phone back to Vulov. He took it and looked at her with an expression she had not seen from him before, not the inventory assessment, not the tactical calculation, not the careful management of something large and dangerous. Something quieter than all of that. Something that had arrived, she thought, sometime in the last several hours and had not announced itself. You called an FBI special counsel from my phone, he said. Yes, she said, and gave him our location. Yes, which means in 2 hours federal agents will be here. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. You understand what that means for me. She looked at him directly. I understand what it means, she said. And I think you understood it too, somewhere around the time you handed me that phone. He held her gaze. The network that's been operating inside your organization, she said. The trafficking, the use of your routes, your name, your infrastructure, it's documented. It's on the recorder. But what's also documented and what I will make sure is on the record with Chen is the nature of your cooperation tonight. She paused. You cut me down. You investigated from the inside before you knew I existed. You secured 21 people. You provided the resource that led to Holt's identification and confession. She paused again. That is the story I tell, because that is the true story. I'm not a good man, Miss Whitford, he said, and he said it without self-pity, without deflection, just the plain direct statement of someone who had made a decision long ago about what he was going to be and had lived with the full weight of it. I know what you are, she said. I've been reading your file for 8 months. She held his gaze. I also know what you did tonight. Those two things don't cancel each other out. No, she said, they don't, but they're both true and the true story is what I write. She paused. I don't clean people up, Mr. Vulov. I don't make monsters into heroes, but I also don't make complicated men into simple ones because it's easier. He was quiet for a long time. Then Dima, he said. What about him? He's 26, he said. He has been inside my organization since he was 19. Everything he knows, everything he is, was built inside something that a federal investigation will now examine in detail. He said it without asking for anything, just putting it in the air between them, a fact looking for a place to land. Dima cooperated fully with an active investigation, she said. He provided intelligence, secured victims, identified network infrastructure. He's the reason 21 people are out tonight. She looked at him. I will make sure Chen knows that too, explicitly and on record. Something moved through Vulov's face, through the scar and the bone structure and the controlled surface of it, something that arrived and passed so quickly that she almost missed it. Almost. Thank you, he said. She realized the first time she had heard him say those words. He said them the same way he said everything, flatly, factually, without performance. As if thanks were simply the accurate word for the transaction, and accuracy was something he refused to compromise on regardless of the circumstances. Before she could respond, the door behind them opened and Dima came out. He had his hand on Alexei's arm, the young man leaning slightly, moving carefully with the specific economy of someone whose body had a shorter operating range than it used to. 22 years old and carrying 61 days of it in every line of him. Dark-eyed, thin, with a face that had been before, though all of this was probably open in the way that young men's faces are open before the world teaches them to close. Alexei looked at Vulov and stopped. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Vulov crossed the distance in 4 steps and put one hand on the back of the young man's head and pulled him forward briefly in the way that men who do not perform emotion sometimes express it abruptly, completely, without explanation. Alexei's hand came up and gripped Vulov's jacket. It lasted 3 seconds. Then Vulov stepped back and looked at him and said in a voice that was stripped of every professional layer, "You should have come to me." "I didn't know if I could trust the channel," Alexei said. His voice was rough, careful. "I didn't know how deep it went. I was afraid if I came directly." "I know," Vulov said. "I know." He looked at him for a long moment. "I'm here now." Alexei nodded, once. The nod of someone who has been holding a weight alone for so long that the simple presence of someone to share it with is itself a kind of shock. Phoebe appeared beside Alexei. She had walked out behind them and she stood close to him with the easy, protective proximity of 2 people who had been through something together and had become in the way that shared extremity sometimes creates the kind of close that has nothing to do with the length of time and everything to do with the depth of it. Alexei looked at Phoebe and said something in a low voice. She shook her head and said something back. He almost smiled. It didn't quite make it, but it was in the vicinity. Amelia watched her sister and thought she held him together too. That's what Dima couldn't say out loud. She was in there holding a 22-year-old informant together for however many months they were in that place at the same time, because that is exactly what Phoebe Whitford does with frightened people. The medical team arrived 19 minutes before Chen. They came in 2 vehicles, moved fast, took Phoebe first at Amelia's insistence and Phoebe's loud objection, then Alexei, then the others. Amelia submitted to a blood pressure check and a cursory assessment of her wrists and then held up her recorder and said she needed 20 more minutes before she could sit still, and the paramedic looked at her with the expression of someone who recognized an immovable object when they met one and moved on to the next patient. Chen arrived with 4 agents in the particular energy of someone who had been briefed in transit and was still assembling the full picture on arrival. He was mid-50s, compact, with the kind of face that had been trained by decades of interviewing to give nothing away, but when he looked at the lineup of what was waiting for him at this location, something moved through his expression that was not nothing. He looked at Vulov first. A long, assessing look, the look of 2 people who know each other's names from a distance and are meeting the actual person for the first time. "Coast," he said. "Chenha," Vulov said. "You're cooperating voluntarily." "I am cooperating," Vulov said. "The voluntary component is because of her." He looked at Amelia. Chen turned to her. "Miss Whitford?" He held out his hand. She shook it. "The recorder first," she said, "then Holt. Then I need 20 minutes to brief you on the international structure before you talk to him, because he is going to try to manage what he gives you, and I need you to know what he's holding back before he starts talking." Chen looked at her for a moment. Then, "All right. And the cooperation framework for Vulov and Dima Sorel needs to be on record before Holt says a single word," she said. "Because once Holt starts talking, I don't want any ambiguity about the sequence of cooperation." "Agreed," Chen said. "And the federal marshal?" "We picked him up 40 minutes ago," Chen said, "based on your message to my office." She stopped. "I didn't send a message to your office." Chen reached into his jacket and produced a phone. On the screen was a text message sent to his office's secure tip line, timestamped 2 hours and 17 minutes ago, before she had even called him, containing the marshal's name badge number and a 3-sentence summary of his role in the network. She looked at it. She looked at Vulov. He was looking at the ground, and there was something in the angle of his jaw that was not quite the absence of an expression so much as the very deliberate manufacture of one. "You sent that," she said. "I sent it when we left the secondary location," he said, "while you were with your sister. You sent it before I called Chen." "Yes." "Before we even discussed involving federal authorities." "Yes." She stared at him. "You were already planning to bring Chen in." "I have been building a case for 6 weeks," he said. "I told you that. What I didn't tell you is that the case was always intended to go to Chen. I don't have the mechanism to prosecute my own people. I have the mechanism to build the evidence and then put it in front of someone who does." He paused. "I am not the law, Miss Whitford. I know what I am. But I can recognize when something has moved outside the territory I operate in, and this," he gestured at the building, the vehicles, the 21 people being triaged behind them. "This was always going to end with federal intervention. I was just waiting until I had enough to make it hold." She looked at him for a long moment. "You were going to do this regardless of me," she said. "Yes," he said. "Then why?" "Because you have the recorder," he said, "and Holt's confession, and 8 months of documentation I don't have, and a story that when it publishes makes it impossible for anyone to bury what Chen finds." He held her gaze. "I can give Chen the evidence. You give him the narrative that makes the evidence stick in the public record where it can't be made to disappear." He paused. "I needed both. Tonight gave me both." She breathed. "You could have told me that 2 hours ago," she said. "You wouldn't have believed me 2 hours ago," he said. He was right. She would not have. 2 hours ago, she had still been holding the possibility, the necessary survival-critical possibility, that this man was the setup and not the solution. She had needed to arrive at this moment through her own evidence, her own assessment, her own accumulated read of him across hours of crisis. He had known that. He had given her the space to get there. She looked at Konstantin Vulov, the scar on his jaw, and the dark, quick eyes, and the 12-year-old Mastiff currently sitting in the care of a federal agent who had been informed by Dima that the dog was not under any circumstances to be separated from his owner. And she thought about what it meant that this was the man who had found her of all the people who could have walked through that warehouse door. She thought about the version of this story in which she had died there, in which no one found her, in which Phoebe stayed in that room and Alexei stayed in that room, and Raymond Holt made his 93-second call and received his instructions, and the network kept running inside its host until it finished consuming it and moved on to the next one. She thought about how close that version had been. "Mr. Vulov," she said. He looked at her. "When this is over," she said, "I'm going to write the true story, all of it. The network, the architect, the international structure, the federal marshal, the cooperation." She paused. "All of it, including you, including what you are and what you did tonight, and why the two things are both true simultaneously." "I know," he said. "It's going to be complicated," she said. "I've been complicated my entire life," he said. "I don't expect the record to be simpler." She nodded. Then she turned and walked toward Chen, pulling the recorder from her jacket, and behind her she heard Vulov tell Tsar, who had apparently decided that federal custody was not a constraint that applied to mastiffs, to come, and the sound of the dog's paws on the frozen ground fell into step beside her without being asked. She did not look down, but she felt it. Phoebe found her an hour later when the immediate chaos had moved into the more structured chaos of federal processing and statements and the careful documented unraveling of 8 months of machinery. She sat down next to Amelia on the back bumper of one of the medical vehicles and leaned her shoulder against her sister's and said nothing for almost a full minute. Then the man with the dog. "Yes," Amelia said. "Who is he actually?" "It's complicated," Amelia said. Phoebe was quiet for a moment. "He keeps looking at you," she said. "The way people look at something, they're still deciding what to do about." Amelia said nothing. "And you keep not looking at him," Phoebe said, "which is a different version of the same thing." "Phoebe, I'm just observing. You've been in captivity for 8 months." "My eyes still work," Phoebe said. Amelia looked at her sister, the short hair and the angles and the eyes that were their mother's eyes, sharp and warm, and stubbornly, irreducibly alive, and felt the 8 months of distance between them collapse into nothing, the way it always did, the way it always had, because some distances are not about geography or time, but about the specific, irreplaceable frequency of another person. And Phoebe Whitford had been on Amelia's frequency since the day she was born. "I'll explain later," Amelia said. "I'll hold you to that," Phoebe said. They sat together in the cold shoulder to shoulder while the federal machinery turned and the Montana night pressed close around them, and somewhere behind them, Konstantin Vulov stood with his dome and his silence, and the full complicated weight of what one night had cost and what it had, against all reasonable probability, returned. 48 hours later, Amelia filed the story. It ran in 3 publications simultaneously, the architecture she had built against exactly this contingency, the fail-safe that became the publication strategy. The headline named Raymond Holt, named the network, named the international structure his dead man's switch had helped expose, named the federal marshal, named every piece of the machinery that had believed itself invisible. It did not simplify Konstantin Vulov. It did not make him something he was not. It told the true story, the whole story, the one that required holding 2 completely contradictory things at once and refusing to resolve the contradiction into something easier, because the contradiction was the truth, and the truth was the only thing Amelia Whitford had ever known how to write. 3 weeks later, Chen's task force made arrests across 4 countries. 6 weeks after that, Phoebe testified before a federal grand jury, clear-eyed and precise and devastating with the manifest she had memorized, because she had not been able to make copies, but she had memorized all of it because she was Phoebe Whitford, and she did not let things go, delivered intact, word for word, name for name. Amelia was in the hallway outside the grand jury room when Phoebe came out. She looked at her sister, and Phoebe looked back, and between them passed the specific, wordless understanding of 2 people who have been through the worst thing together and have arrived on the other side of it, still standing. "Well," Amelia said. Phoebe straightened her jacket. "I think I want to go to law school," she said. Amelia stared at her. "Data entry," Phoebe said, "has lost some of its appeal." The laugh that came out of Amelia was the kind that hurt and healed simultaneously, and it echoed off the courthouse walls and went somewhere out into the world, free and unstoppable and entirely itself. Some things once lost come back different. Some things come back exactly the same. And some things, the ones you fought for in the dark with nothing but a name and a refusal to let go, come back so completely and so stubbornly intact that the only possible response is to hold them close and walk forward and never, not for one single day, take for granted the miracle of a door that opens.